welcome to another English language class today. My name is Happiness Ndewe, and today we'll be looking at summary writing in the theme writing. But before we go into our lesson for today, let's take a look briefly at the objectives we have for this lesson. By the end of our lesson today, you should be able to define a summary, list and explain the types of summaries, state the purpose and importance of writing summaries, and list and explain some tips for writing summaries. Now let's go into our lesson. As we discuss with our friends or as we engage in conversations with our family members or those around us, we find out that sometimes we tell a lot of stories. And sometimes these stories are quite long or lengthy. Now, what do we do when we want to cut our long stories short? Can you guess? When we want to cut our long stories short, we make them in form of summaries, or we summarize those stories. When we do so, we are telling or giving a summary of our stories. So when we cut our long stories short, we are giving a summary of those stories. Now, we can therefore say that summary writing has to do with cutting long stories short by stating just a few details of the story. So when you want to cut a long story short, you do it in form of a summary. Now let's look at what a summary is. What or how can we define a summary? A summary is defined as the short form of a longer writing or the short form of a larger reading. Now, this means that we can summarize a piece of writing or a reading. When you come across a text or a written work that is quite lengthy, we can summarize that text. In the same way, when someone is talking or making a speech, we can also summarize that speech. So we can summarize a piece of writing or a speech or a reading. Summaries can either be written or spoken, which is what I've just explained. But this lesson deals with summary writing because our theme has to do with writing. Now, what is summary writing? Summary writing is defined as the process of highlighting or writing down the main or most important points of a longer writing in short statements. Very important, in short statements. This is done in order to shorten the initial writing. When we write summaries, we do not necessarily repeat the exact words in the larger writing. We use our own words to express the relevant details of the main writing, and we do this as briefly as possible. So when we intend to make a long writing short, or when we want to capture or highlight all the details of a long writing, we do so in form of a summary. And take note that a summary is the short form of a longer writing, which means that you do not repeat the same exact words in the larger writing in your summary, because your intention is to make that summary as short as possible. Now let's look at the types of summaries we have. There are three basic types of summaries, and they are the main point summary, the key point summary, and the outline summary. These are the three types of summaries we have. Now, what is the main point summary? The summary states only the most important facts in a text. We find this kind of summary in articles. So when you find a summary that states only the main points, only the most important details in a text, that kind of summary is known as a main point summary. The next is the key point summary. And this type of summary also states the main points, but in addition, it highlights the reasons and evidences that support the main idea of the writing briefly. So the difference between a main point summary and a key point summary is that the key point summary highlights the evidences or reasons to support the main points. It also states the main points, but also gives reasons why that main point stands in a text. But the main point summary just states the main points or important points of the writing. Now, the third type of summary is the outline summary. And this type of summary highlights the main points of the writing in the order in which they appeared in the text. So we find that the outline summary, as it were, gives a list of points, list of main points in a text in the order in which they appear. So these are the three types of summaries we have in writing. Now, what is the purpose or the reason for writing summaries? Why do we write summaries? We write summaries to give brief details of the initial writing. When you want to give short details of a longer writing, we write summaries. So that is the basic reason or purpose why we write summaries. And this means that summaries allow us to restate information in a way that is short and in order. In a way that is short and in order. Now, let's also look at the importance of summary writing. Why is it important? Summary writing is important because it helps us get the details of a long writing in a short time. And this is helpful to readers who love to spend little time reading long materials. There are people that cannot stand long materials. They cannot read for a long period of time. Now, if every writing is long in nature, you find that these kind of people who do not like to read long materials would lose out on the essence of that writing. So if they pick up a book that is quite lengthy, they can go to the back of the book. You know that books sometimes have summaries at the back page. So these people go to the back to read the summary, to get what the book is all about in a short period of time. So writing summaries is helpful to these kind of people. Now, bearing this in mind will help us write better summaries. Bearing the importance of summary writing and the purpose of summary writing in mind would enable us to write our summaries properly. Now, let's look at some tips that would help us when we write summaries. Some tips that would be helpful in summary writing. Now, the first thing to do before writing a summary is to read through the passage. For us to do summary writing, there has to be a text or a written material which we should read before summarizing. We cannot just bring up a summary of anything. There has to be a written material or text which we want to summarize. So the first thing to do is to read through the passage carefully. We cannot summarize what we have not read through and properly understood. It is therefore important to read through the writing or text that we are supposed to summarize, so that we can take note of the content of the story and thoroughly understand what the writing is about. This is why we need to read through the text carefully before summarizing. We need to know what is written in the text. We need to understand it properly. The understanding of what we have read would enable us write a better summary. After the first reading, it is necessary to read through the text again, but this time highlighting the main points and main characters in each paragraph, because those will make up the summary. Now, after reading the text the first time, it is advisable to read through the text again. This will enable you understand what you have read properly, because some people do not understand a piece of writing by reading it just once. Some others have to read over and over again. Some people understand when they've read it once. But for us to write good summaries, it's important for us to read through the text and read through again so that we would understand properly. Now, the second time we read through the text, it is advisable that we highlight the main points, just as I'm doing on the board. I've highlighted this point. I have also highlighted these points. As you can see, the fonts or the characters are darker in colors. So you highlight the main points in the text so that you would easily pick them out to make up your summary. Now, another thing to take note of when writing summaries is the 5 W's and H elements of the passage. As we read through the text, we should take note of the person or people talked about in a writing, that is who. We should also take note of the major actions that occurred, and that is what. We also should take note of where the major actions took place, where. And also when the major actions happened. We also should take note of the reason for the action, that is why, and then how it happened. Now, these words I have circled are known as the 5 W's and H elements. As you can see, who begins with W. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 W's and H. H stands for how. Now, using these elements to examine what we are reading can help us write good summaries. So take note of the when, where, who, what, why, and how elements in what you are reading. It would help you write your summary better. Now, also take note of the fact that we should leave out minor details and explanations. When you're writing a summary, do not nibble on minor details or things that don't really add to the essence of what you are summarizing. The aim of writing summaries is to create a shorter version of the original work. When we put in all the details of the original work, our summary will not be too different from the main text. So you see, when we add the minor details or the explanations that we found in the original work, when we put them in our summary, you find out that the main work is still almost or still the same or almost like the summary. So there's really no difference. And that is not the essence of writing summaries. So leave out those explanations and all those details that would make the work look long. Also, use your own words but not your own opinion. This is very, very important in writing summaries. In summary writing, we rewrite the important details from the original text in our own words. This means that we paraphrase our statements. Now, what this means is that we do not use the exact words found in the original text all the way. You do not quote everything in the original text the way they appear there in your summary. We are advised to use our own words to paraphrase, to change the sentences, to make them sound like our own. But while we do that, we should bear in mind that we do not add our opinion to what we are writing. In as much as we are changing the words, paraphrasing the sentences, let the opinion or let the idea of that sentence remain the same as in the original text. Don't change the author's idea or the author's opinion. It is not ideal to use the exact words from the text we are summarizing or state our own opinions or assumptions about the text. However, the exception to this rule happens when we must state definitions or specific explanations the exact ways they appear in the text. In this case, we write the quote in quotation marks to indicate that it was taken from the text verbatim. Now, I did say earlier that we do not use the exact words of the author of the text all the time when we write summaries, but if we must, we can use the exact words in situations where we have to cite or state definitions or explanations that cannot be changed or paraphrased. Things that are statements of facts. For example, if you say something like the sun is hot, there's no way you can change that sentence to mean another thing or to sound some other way. It is a known fact that should remain that way. Now, if we must quote what the author has said word for word, we put the sentence in quotation marks. So when we write what the author has said here, we put these quotation marks at the beginning and at the end of what we have quoted. Another thing to note is that we should make the summary short and straight to the point. A good summary usually does not include unnecessary details. It is short and addresses the main details straight to the point. Now, ideally, the length of a good summary should be about 1/4 of the original text. So if the original text is made up of 200 words, the summary of that writing should consist of about 50 words or less. What this is trying to say is that our summary should be short. A summary is not supposed to be lengthy. If the main text is lengthy, the essence of writing a summary is to make that lengthy work as brief as possible. So if you have a text that is about 200 words, ideally the summary of that text should be 1/4 of that text. So divide the total number of words you have in that text by 4. And if I do that for this case, we have 200 divided by 4. The answer is 50. So our summary should be 50 words long or less. So this is how to calculate summary writing, to make it as short as possible. Now, next thing to look at is the fact that we should take note of the main ideas and supporting ideas. Every writing has a main idea or main ideas and other supporting ideas. Main ideas are the most important points about a topic, while supporting ideas are those statements or examples that enable us fully understand the main idea. Supporting ideas describe, explain, or clarify the main idea of a particular topic. So every text or writing or topic has a central idea or a main idea which the author of that writing intends to pass on to his readers. The writing also has supporting ideas which describe, explain, or throw more light on that main idea. So when we write, we should ensure that we identify the main ideas and supporting ideas and present them as briefly as possible. If you can identify main and supporting ideas, your summary writing will be an easy task. Now, having talked about some tips to enable us or to guide us write summaries properly, let's take a look at this short story on the board and summarize it as brief as possible. You can read with me as I read. On Sunday night, a dark, lanky-looking stranger staggered into Mr. Ojo's compound. The compound was quiet and dark. As the man walked across the garden, the dogs barked fiercely. The stranger became afraid and stopped moving for a while. He brought out a whistle, blew it loudly, and fell to the ground for fear of the dogs. At the sound of the whistle, Mr. Ojo and his sons rushed out to the garden to see who was there. When they got to the garden, they found the stranger lying helplessly on the ground. Mr. Ojo carried him into his car and rushed out to the hospital with his sons. Now, this is a story that we are going to summarize. If you look at the board, I have highlighted the main characters or ideas in red. Now, this will guide me to do a summary of this story, as we shall see in the next slide. Now, this is a summary of that story. Now, listen as I read. On Sunday night, a stranger staggered into Mr. Ojo's compound. While he walked across the garden, the dogs barked fiercely. He blew a whistle loudly and fell to the ground because he was afraid. Mr. Ojo and his sons rushed out to the garden and found him lying on the ground. So they quickly rushed him to the hospital. Now, if you compare this summary to what I have on this slide, you would see that this one is longer than this. But this summary here still captures everything I have said here. Now, if you look closely, I have identified when. Remember when I talked about the 5 W's and H elements? I have identified when the action took place, and it took place on Sunday night. I've also identified who was involved, a stranger. Who? Now, what was his action? What did he do? He staggered into Mr. Ojo's compound. So staggered is what? That was what he did. Now, where was he, or where did the action take place? It took place in Mr. Ojo's compound. So Mr. Ojo's compound is where? Now, we also have the dogs barked fiercely. Dogs barked. This was what they did. So this is another what? Fiercely. This was how they barked. So this is my how element. He blew a whistle loudly. This is another how element, showing how he blew a whistle. So blew a whistle is another what? Another thing he did. And then he fell to the ground because he was afraid. Mr. Ojo here is another character in my story. So we have who? And his sons. They are also included in the who. Now, what did they do? They rushed out to the garden. They rushed out. This was what they did. So we have what? This was the action they performed. Now, where did they rush to? They rushed to the garden. This is our where the action took place. Another thing they did was that they quickly rushed him to the hospital. So rushed is another action, what? This was what they did. How did they do this? They did it quickly. So this is how. And where did they rush him to? They rushed him to the hospital. Where? So we see that this summary has captured the elements of a good summary, 5 W's and 1 H. So we find that this short summary here has captured everything we said in this story. All we did was to leave out the minor details like describing the stranger, a dark, lanky-looking stranger. We also left out how quiet and dark the compound was, because these details are not really necessary in writing summaries. All you have to do when writing a summary is to pick out the main points which explain the essence of that story. So this is an example of how to write a good summary. We've come to the end of our lesson today on summary writing. Now let's look at the summary for this lesson. Today we learned that a summary is the short form of a longer writing or the short form of a larger reading. We also learned about the 3 basic types of summaries, and we said they are main point summaries, key point summaries, and outline summaries. And then we looked at summary writing and we said that it is important because, and then we looked at the importance of summary writing and we said that summary writing is important because it allows us get the details of a long writing in a short time. And then we looked at some tips for summary writing and we said they include the fact that we should read through the passage and highlight main points. And also take note of the 5 W's and H elements, and then use our own words but not our own ideas. And then we should also take note of main and supporting ideas. So these were the tips we looked at briefly. Now let's look at our test for today's lesson. Our question for today says, which of these is not a type of summary? A, outline summary, B, total summary, or C, key points summary. The correct answer is B, total summary. The 3 types of summaries we talked about are main points summaries, outline summaries, and key points summaries. So total summary is not a type of summary. So if you picked B, you are absolutely correct. And here we end our lesson today on summary writing. I hope you learned a lot and I hope you can write summaries on your own now. Thank you for watching and see you in our next lesson.
If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel. You can also turn on notifications to stay updated on new videos on this channel. This Brain Friend video was brought to you by SUMMARIES. For more of these amazing e-learning videos, get your copy of Brain Friend. With more than 1,000 e-learning videos, over 74,000 test items in more than 40 subjects, a career counseling guide, and many other amazing features, BrainFriend remains your foremost e-learning and exam preparatory software. BrainFriend. Learn better, make excellent grades.